Tom Strong again, and I'm here to introduce Arthur Winslow. Arthur is Director of Lean Construction at Graham. Did I get that right?
Lean. Yeah, you did. Art is fine. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
At Graham Construction. Graham Construction is one of Canada's largest construction firms operating right across, North America, right across Canada and in the U.S., I believe.
In the U.S. as well, yeah.
And Arthur is he's one of the innovators in our industry. He's been focused on lean construction and IPD for over 10 years. He's got 30 years of experience. He's one of the leaders of innovation in our industry and at Graham Construction. So very excited to have him with us. Arthur's worked on some major projects, major IPD project in Moose Jaw, I believe. He's on the Lean Construction Institute Canada. He's part of that organization, kind of driving lean, which is a methodology which he's going to get into obviously right now on how to operate and improve what we do. And he's on this the CCDC task force. So anyways, yeah, so Arthur, I really appreciate you taking the time. I think it's going to be a great presentation. And I'll turn it over to you. And then just a reminder, everybody, that if you have questions as Arthur is speaking, please enter them into the chat window there. There's a tab where you can enter in questions, and then we'll get those questions asked at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over.
Okay. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'm going to be turning the camera off in just a few minutes. I find it eats up bandwidth and takes away from the presentation. So if it's all right with everyone, I'll turn off my camera in a second. And besides, I don't know that you want to see my face for the next 30 minutes. So hopefully I'm doing everyone a favor. So yeah, I've been in the business now. This is my 33rd year. I did about 23 years of that doing things what I now know is the wrong way, and the last 10 years doing lean and more the collaborative approach to construction. And I'm hoping I can share some of my lessons learned, sort of the approach we take, and hopefully give some of people in the audience a bit of a takeaway. This is new for me, doing a webinar. I'm used to speaking live, but certainly not on a webinar. So just bear with me as I experience this for the first time. So first, I'm going to turn the video off. So hopefully people are relieved now, and we'll start. So we're going to talk about collaborative construction. I'm Art Winslow, Graham Construction, 10 years, their collaborative lean innovation director, and hopefully we can share with each other through the questions at the end of this. So first off, the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the industry, what it looks like now, and then we're going to talk about the collaborative approach, which is based in a lot, as I said, a lot of the lessons learned through doing this lean approach. We'll go over some of the 4 pillars of collaborative construction, which is really, to me, alignment, cultivation, measuring, and continuous improvement, and we'll finish with some questions. So first off, we tend to work in silos in the industry, especially we tend to resort back to the behaviors and the way we do things. And if you look at the siloed approach, it's really where people are doing the work, but they're doing it in a way that other people don't know everything that others are doing in the organization and or the project team. And we find that if you look at how a simple thing like a change order is managed, oftentimes that's a prime example of a siloed approach where something happens on site. There's a need for a change order is done, it's given, thrown over to the next silo where the contractor sits. They'll send it over to a couple other silos where the subtrades price it. They throw it back to the contractor silo. Contractor throws it out to the architect silo. So there's not a lot of collaboration in the current way we do things. And one of the things that becomes obvious about that is how we add value, or how much we add value to a project. And if we look at the statistics of that, we start to realize in manufacturing, which is a more, let's say, because of it's a more stable environment, let's say, they're adding value to about 62% of what they do. In construction, we have, so if you look on the diagram there, it's what's in red represents the value add. If you look at the construction industry, we have an opportunity to improve, and this is where lean and collaboration really start to jump in. 10% of what we do in construction really adds value, so there's the opportunity. So how do we start to leverage some of that or create some of this opportunity? Well, I look at behaviors, traditional behaviors. Oftentimes behaviors are driven from the contractual models that we are exposed to for years and years and years. I know that was my case. But when I start to break down projects and project teams in whatever delivery model it is, lump sum, CMDB, and now IPD, I look at behaviors of the team. And behaviors, it's really as much about the people involved as the tools implemented. To effectively use tools, the team needs to align around sustainable behaviors. So what we do is we start to define the behaviors that we want to see, and we start to enforce the good behaviors and sort of look at ways we can change behaviors as we're evolving through a project. We look at, and through those good behaviors, we find that we start to get a project culture or a team culture that starts to emerge. It's a shared team ideology that binds people together and defines how healthy value-based interactions occur. So change the behaviors, you start to change the culture in which the project is being managed, executed, and a whole lot of good things come out of those two things alone. So that's really where we like to start, is with behaviors and culture. We want to understand that people bring their own baggage. I can tell you, before I started doing things really collaboratively, I had a boatload of baggage that I was bringing to projects from my 20 years, my past 20 years in the industry. So we have to recognize that people bring that into a team environment or a project environment, and need to understand that we have to share those perspectives so we can get to a place that's really more in an alignment perspective. And here's just walk you through a couple of questions. So as a contractor, we're often, and by the way, my perspective is going to be a lot from the contractor's perspective. It's what I know. So hopefully I'm not too biased as I go through the rest of the slides. But teams often jump in a project thinking they understand. Oftentimes those projects are fast track. We have to do things as quickly as possible. And then if I was to ask you, do GCs know how to build? Do designers know what they have drawn? Do owners know what they expect? The answer to those questions are inevitably yes. But if I was to ask you, do contractors know what owners expect? Do owners know that the designers captured the expectations properly? And do architects know that the GC correctly interpreted the drawings? I can tell you that every one of those answers is likely no. And there's where the problems happen. And this is where collaboration enters. So the quote there is, problems occur between what is known. Enter collaboration. So if we look at collaboration, I've broken this down into 4 posts or pillars, really about alignment first, which is really about setting behaviors, culture, creating measurable goals, establishing common protocols. And we hear that a lot in the BIM world, and we talk about creating protocols right up front. Well, the entire project needs to have protocols set up and processes. We align around the risks and opportunities. We outline roles and responsibilities, and we create a bit of team structure around in order to get that first pillar alignment sort of going. As the project evolves and the team evolves, we want to nurture that collaboration and build that trust. And remember, trust takes time to build, and trust occurs when people start executing or doing what they say they're going to do. That's the fastest way to build trust on a team. We want to have open communications. We want rapid issue resolution, and recognize successes. And the other thing that we like to do, and I have pictures for most of these as we go along here, but we like to create visual boards so that people all are looking at the same thing and understand the metrics in a very common way. The third post is measuring or recognizing. So it's ongoing monitoring, even as far down to as team health. A lot of teams measure schedule. But how about how well the team is doing from a health perspective, from a productivity or a production perspective? How well are the champions of this way we're operating? How about celebrating the process champions? Then we get into the fourth pillar, which I deem as continuous improvement. So we want to be challenging a team to be taking an active role in ways to improve what we're doing and better the outcomes for not only for the team, but for each individual person that's on the project. So we want to look at stressing ongoing assignments, and we want to be testing assumptions. Is that the best way to do things? Even though, despite the fact you've been doing something for 5 or 10 years a certain way, is that really the best way? Is that best for the project that we're currently on? So that sort of gives you an idea of the 4 pillars we're talking about. I'm going to dive into each one of these a little bit. I mean, we only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to dive into each one a little bit here. So we look at alignment. So one of the best ways to quickly align a team, and again, this is regardless of delivery model or contract type, you can commonly create a set of values, a set of team values. And I know that sounds really soft, especially in a construction environment, but I find that even the most toughest characters you find on a construction site understand this. They understand that the team works better when it's pulling in the same direction. And one of the quickest and easiest ways I found is here's an example on my screen where I was called into a project team that wasn't performing very well. And I first thing I did was, where's your values? Where are you going? Where's your north? And so what we did is very quickly, we created a few things. I captured them on a whiteboard, as you can see live, and I took a picture of it. So that became the 4, there's 4 of them outlined there. That really became the values that this team now understood collectively and could make decisions and actively participate in support of those goals. It just helped to align people around a common vision. You can adapt. I know in the integrated project delivery world, we talk about something, a BigRoom, which is a space where a team co-locates often and frequently. But you can take some of this idea and apply it to a job trailer. Have some technology available. Most of the projects I'm involved with now, I'll insist that we have a big TV screen, a touch screen sometimes. You want to have as much wall space as possible to display everything you need to display. You got to organize the team in a way that has a bit of structure to it. Develop processes for like what's the invoice process is an easy one to lay out. So many times there's confusion and vagueness around how am I going to get paid? Well, map out that process and figure out where your roadblocks are. It can be done on any delivery model. Well-planned meetings, huddle often. Use a parking lot, especially if in a meeting you're getting bogged down with something. Agree that 1 or 2 of you should talk about something later instead of tying up 10 or 20 people that are currently at the meeting. And Create rules of engagement. That's a big one, and it's an easy, low-hanging fruit thing that any of us can do. Create a list of how we want people to behave inside of a job trailer or a big room settings type of arrangement. So create the rules of how we're all going to agree to be in that space. Creating structure, just a quick example of how we create structure across the top, people on the project across the side, what we have to execute or deliver on. So again, an easy way to create structure. Everyone knows who's going to do what. And again, this is an example of just a couple of processes that we developed early on. How are you going to do something? Like, for example, how are you going to get paid? What's the change order process really look like when you map out all the steps to it? So again, designed so that everyone understands equally the process. Without having a common vision of what everyone is supposed to do, we find that's where the gaps happen, that's where the arguments happen, and that's where waste occurs, is in those gaps that aren't mapped out. So take the time, do these things up front, create an alignment around the way you want the project to be, and then what you're left with is simply executing based on the parameters and the processes that you've created. Second pillar is cultivate. You want to cultivate, enhance the collaboration, create the environment, celebrate the successes. And one of the things that I like to do is just look at traditional meetings. If we look at some statistics from, this is traditional construction meetings, by the way. If we look at meetings, over 50% of managers' time is spent in meetings. I mean, that's staggering when you start to realize it, but I know when I think back on my career, I certainly agree with that I did spend a lot of time in meetings. almost 60% of meetings are dominated by one or two people. This is a funny one, 32% of people feel that they could get fired for actually speaking the truth. And this more applies to say a traditional setting. Almost 40% of decisions are made after the meeting, not while the meeting has happened. 80% of the discussions that happen in meetings are things that people already agree on. I think that's human nature. If you look at how people, they want to connect with people, so they go to familiar territory in a meeting, and they don't want to be confrontational often, especially on the Canadian side. I can tell you, having worked in the U.S. and learnt a lot of this stuff, Americans are a bit more, let's say, open and honest about things. I find Canadians tend to be a bit more reserved about things. So I'm not surprised at that statistic. 55% of momentum is lost when managers return to their offices or their silos. And this is my own personal one. If I actually listen critically in meetings, I find that most people like talking about something rather than deciding about something. They'll always the tendency is to defer a decision until it's a smaller group. So just an interesting, my own personal observation to round out that survey. So how can we change something like a meeting? Well, we can create an accurate agenda. We can not waste people's time and invite those people to a meeting that really only need to be there and that are going to add value. If you're not going to add value, why are you there? Why do you need to be there? And later probably complain that you were bored stiff because you didn't say anything in the meeting. You can set time limits, set outcomes. What do you want to achieve in the meeting? I mean, this is sort of 101 stuff sometimes, but and then who chairs the meeting, who scribes, and who leads the meeting. Interesting. If we look at typical minutes that we keep in meetings, if we look at that, how we capture meetings, and we compare it to Like normally you capture a meeting that we talked about this and that, and we're going to get together next week to talk some more. That's really how minutes are typically kind of taken. I've done my share of minutes and seen enough of them lately that I sort of know that's how minutes are written. But if we start looking at minutes differently, or how we capture the essence of a meeting, and we start thinking in terms of outcomes, not necessarily what we're talking about, or the discussion point itself, but what is the effect of what we're talking about, or the downstream effect of what we're talking about. And then we start asking ourselves, what do I need to make this thing we're talking about happen? We'll often discover that the discussion point becomes less of a priority than other things that have to be done or that will happen as a result of the discussion point. So what the challenge here I'd like to see people do is try that. If you're in a meeting or you're taking notes, just start thinking in terms of what is the outcome of what is being talked about. And tell me if I'm wrong, but what I've seen is that most items talked about in minutes or meetings, they'll actually have anywhere between 10 and 15 tasks associated with it that A, never get talked about, and B, never get captured. So what I find interesting is now when I go to meetings, I actually will bring with me Post-it notes, and I'll make notes on these little Post-it notes as people are talking about a discussion point. And I'll then, after the meeting, I'll map out, put them in sequential order, and bring it to someone's attention, usually the PM or the foreman, and say, do you guys know you talked about 10 things and you're one thing, and yet there's 10 things that outcomes from that one thing. Anyway, try it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Hopefully, I know many of you, but hopefully you can either phone me or email me following this with, if you try it, I want to hear and get some data from you. So this is another, so I have this picture on the screen just to show you what this is on an IPD project where we decided to capture the essence of a meeting or discussion point centrally on a whiteboard. So we didn't have people making their own minutes in their own computers. So instead we centralized the minutes, and we found that helped people focus and execute a lot more effectively as well. So the third post is measure. So put statistics up on the wall, put your data up on the wall. Identify the board is continuous improvement. Identify and celebrate your continuous improvements, good or bad. Usually if there's an improvement attempt that fails, worst case is you've got some strong lessons learned and you know not what to do. Put some metrics up, production metrics on a board. Celebrate that the concrete person increased, or concrete firm increased their productivity by 20% last week. Celebrate those things, and any other measures you want to think of that you think would support the project you're on. But display them, celebrate them. Collaborative planning, that also supports the third pillar here. Have your weekly meetings, have your huddles. So these are some examples of the planning, the collaborative planning we do on not only the integrated project delivery or lean projects, but on all of our projects now. It's becoming the way to do things because the value of many is way better than the value of one or two people dictating. Do it in design, do it in construction. Anyway, pictures just to help you guys see what that might look like. And this is ultimately the result of collaborative planning. This is called Last Planner System, and it's really a way to dig into the details with measurable tasks that are assigned to individuals on a project team. This is the ultimate result of collaborative planning. You really get a good handle on what the deliverables are. Which is really what Pillar 3 is about. Okay, so then talk about again. Just this is a tool that I'm sure many of you know. It's a support to a schedule. It's really looking at constraints. So instead of looking at a line on a Gantt chart, start drilling in what's going to hold up that work from happening on the Gantt chart, and start listing them. And again, this is a way just to enhance collaboration, making things visible. Assigning a constraint to an individual to resolve so that it's assigned to a single person, not necessarily a company. Then you start to get accountability built into your processes. But start identifying this as an as a way to operate in a public way. Again, just designed to visually focus everyone on what's really important. And then there's continuous improvement. That's the fourth pillar. And again, I don't have many slides on this. I can see here I'm just coming out of time here. But look at where you are. Look at how you can do things better, and what are the steps that we want to take to make the improvement. And yes, it's not easy. Change is difficult. But once you have it, or once you make the change, you're a champion, and you have better productivity, better outcomes, better results. This is how leaders are born, by going against the force of habit that our industry is fraught with. I can tell you, with 23 years in traditional construction, I can tell you it's not easy to swim against the rapids and make change, but that's how you do it. Take a step, lock the change in, take another step, lock the change in, and eventually you're at a future state that's radically different than perhaps where you were. So baby steps. So one of the great parts about this, I know this is a CAN-BIM session, so I want to give a salute here to digital technologies specifically. So digital technologies support everything you just saw. They certainly assist us in testing assumptions. In fact, we're using BIM at every step, BIM and Revit and all kinds of other digital technologies throughout the life cycle of a project. Some of the key points: you can test assumptions. Not only the approach to construction, of course, there's the constructability. How about sequencing? How about matching the drawings themselves against the schedule? Well, that's all done regularly now in digital technology, and helps you identify perhaps where your sequencing is off track and where you want to improve that. It enables efficiency. It supports the schedule, supports sequencing, supports the day-to-day communications that go on. It captures the information, and there's a lot of it in a collaborative environment. It helps capture that and reflect it back out to everyone on the team. It reinforces, by its very nature, reinforces and aligns with the collaborative approach to construction. From the beginning to end, it's a shared knowledge platform with it's clear, concise, and comprehensible, and only adds value to any project. And it satisfies immediate feedback across the team, i.e. constructability. You can do things live, much like we're doing a webinar. We'll often do live sessions now where we can tweak the design live with an operator and get the inputs that are needed in real time, and just saves so much time and creates so much efficiency. So hats off to CAN-BIM for putting this session on, and B for supporting these technologies that work so well for us in the construction industry. And then here's an example. So what we do is, through collaboration, through the use of digital technology, if we can find a way, and this is an example from a $10 million project, a relatively small project. If we can improve labor across the project, not only on a site, but in design, if we can improve our labor efficiency by 5%, we would end up with a 67% increase in the net profit on a $10 million job. Isn't that amazing? And if I was to ask you if you can improve what you do by 5%, I would hazard to guess that most of you could come up with ways to do that. And yet many of us don't. And the productivity rates we have in the construction industry are quite low. So anyway, opportunities here, do things to improve flows like we've just talked about, bring a collaborative approach, and try to improve your efficiency and how things flow on a construction site. And that's it. I think I'm a little bit over my time, but hopefully we can have questions now.
Camera back on there. Great presentation, Arthur. Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed that. So if you have any questions from the audience here, please type those in and I'll get those pushed forward to Arthur. I think it's really great that Graham is really aggressively embraced lean construction, pole planning. What motivated that? I mean, did you have to, I mean, as you've illustrated, kind of push that boulder up a hill, or was there a top-down initiative and you were brought in to help champion that? How did you get it off the ground?
All of that. So I tell the story often that 10 years ago, when we did the first project of this kind in Canada, it already aligned. Other groups saw this as big risk because it's different, as you tend to do in the industry. Graham embraced it right off the start because it aligned with our value system within Graham. And then from there, once we understood what the process was, and it's not just about IPD, it's about the collaborative nature of IPD and the lean approach that we have embraced ever since that project in an enhanced way now. Right.
Was that the Moose Jaw project, or is that a project that's ongoing right now?
No, that was the Moose Jaw Hospital, 2010.
Yeah.
It started, yeah.
And did the client initiate the IPD, or they ask for like a construction management, and then you volunteered and drove a new contract delivery method, or what was the impetus for there?
No, it was interesting that IPD had been around, integrated project delivery had been around in the US for about 10 years. This hospital that we were, the hospital and the government of Saskatchewan at the time flew down to one of those hospitals and actually created an RFP that required the integrated project delivery approach to things. So it was the hospital that generated and had the energy behind this first. And like I said, we just dovetailed into it really well and felt akin to it right from the start.
Right. Did you have challenges? I mean, with that job, and I guess all the jobs you're rolling out lean on right now, how do you onboard the sub trades in a really effective way to get them to take it seriously? Because it is a challenge to gather a group and say, okay, write these post-it notes and stick them on the wall and take this seriously, right? I mean, do you put in their contract? Do you have an onboarding session where you get people excited about participating? What's your methodology for that?
All of that and any of that. It's done either. It can be done through sub-trade contracts. Now, I'm assuming the nature of this question is more designed for how we respond in more traditional contracts. And the IPD,
assuming that you're trying to roll out lean practices on all of your projects, how do you onboard your supply chain to take that process seriously?
So a lot of them, sometimes it can be contractual. A lot of times, though, it's just makes sense, and you get a team on a site early. You don't have a big team early, and if you can start it early with just one or two trades, the civil trades that come early, start getting them on board. They start adapting it and liking it. Guess what? By the time you get on other trades, they can start to influence the behaviors of the trades that follow. And before you know it, you've got a momentum occurring on a project. So it can be very defined, and it can be more on the soft side.
It's definitely a team sport. I mean, but once they see the results, they usually want it. And I'm sure that you're working with the same community of suppliers over and over and over again, and they learn to want it and expect it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when you can start to improve the productivity and outputs of some of the people that work for you, that's where the reinterest, that's where the I want to do this again comes from.
Yeah. So you mentioned that 67% return or more profitability with a 5% increase with the labor. How are you measuring? I had a question here from Vincent. How have you been able to track these the tangible ROI on projects that you've been part of? Are you tracking? How are you measuring?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of questions there. One is that was just a what if. The example is if you can improve 5%. A good number to drive for, and certainly there's great results because of it. You create your baselines first. You in fact, when we're scheduling projects now, we start with productivity. How much can a particular trade do with a crew of a certain size? How much production can they do? We start to schedule based on that baseline productivity. What we do from there is we measure how well they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis against their baseline assumptions. And we start to look at it. You can do what's known as first run studies, where you can film them, video them,
right,
and offer them some tips and tricks on how they can improve. You got some waste over here. How can you improve it? Apply this stuff, and then you measure again. And that's how you do. You create your baselines, and then you make your improvement, and then you measure it again.
Yeah. So you've done some comparisons between projects where it wasn't used and projects where it has been used, as kind of one of the other questions that came up.
Yes, absolutely.
So just generally, do you think, question here from Kirk, do you think that the industry should focus on some common digital tool sets? I assume that question relates to for lean construction and IPD.
Each project is different. I do agree there should be a minimum requirement for a certain level of technology. Now, each project is different, and each demand of a project or outcome of a project is different. So you'd have to supplement or sometimes usurp those baseline tools. But I'd like to see a guideline certainly put out recommending certain levels of tools that as a recommendation, perhaps not as a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Just so much variability within a project. That would be a tricky one. It might be limiting to some project teams.
We've got a lot of great questions coming in here, but I don't think we're going to have time for all the questions, unfortunately. Maybe I'll just do one more specifically about training. How are you? I mean, you're a national business. You have, 1,000 more employees across your business working on decentralized job sites all over the place. And you're one individual working, I think, out of Ontario. So how do you roll out new initiatives? How do you train people on lean processes? What's been your methodology and your strategy for that?
Okay, so first of all, I'll just say I had hair before I started my training across all the offices. So what we do is you want to develop champions within each office. To me, that's the first step. So you start, and we started with a community of practice. Before we rolled out any training, we created a community of practice where people volunteered to talk about lean and its benefits, and we got a core group of people from each one of the offices that we then could work with a little bit, start trying things in each of the offices, and they became the champions. From there, then we could roll out actual training where it wasn't just me from Toronto coming in. It was me with the local champion, sort of bringing other people up to speed on what lean is and what it can bring. But I can tell you at Graham, where it's sort of embedded in how we think, it just makes sense to a lot of people. So it flourished pretty quickly. And even though I've not been training for a couple of years, we find that there still is energy that's sort of self-perpetuating now at each one of our offices.
And I'm sure you're doing a similar thing with the trades, especially when they're specifically involved with a project that's lean. And now the Lean Construction Institute can help to bolster that, right? Because they have somewhere to turn to gather information and training and whatnot.
Yeah, so we're doing that on a national scale through LCI, Lean Construction Institute Canada. But as Graham individually, we're actually doing that as Graham. We're working with trades and bringing them up to speed, as well as we're now trying to get owners and architects on side through a series of webinars that aren't really designed as a sell. They're more designed to, why aren't you doing this? Here's some results of this. And it's not about IPD, Lean. It's about the best practice approach.
Yeah, it's a differentiator, though, certainly for Graham being advanced in this area. And I'm sure that your supply chain appreciates the certainty that it brings to the job. And, when a trade knows they work in this environment, they know that their jobs are going to go smoothly. They're going to have predictable processes. The results on the job financially are going to be more predictable. So I think it helps across the board. Anyways, I really appreciate your time, Art. It was a great presentation. I wish we had time for more questions. I'm sure that you're going to make yourself available to answer questions. If we've got your contact information available, so people can reach out to you directly.
Amen. Yes.
I really appreciate what you said about at the beginning of the job, designing and mapping out and validating all the processes on the job. I think that's definitely best practices that every project manager and superintendent should follow when they kick off a project. Like, think through every part of the job and make sure that all your suppliers and everyone's going to be interacting with the job understand it. I thought that was really intelligent. Anyway, so I'm going to jump into the next room and kick off that presentation. But really appreciate your time, and thanks for all the questions, everybody. Please, we'll make these questions available to Art, and hopefully we can set up something where you can answer these by email or in through maybe an interview that we'll do as a follow up through our newsletter, etc. So. Great presentation. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Yep. Bye, everyone.